Hey guys, I'm Doug.
And I'm Rachel.
And today we're going to talk about things that you thought were only for weirdos from Sedona. Yoga breathing.
Yep.
Well, really deep breathing. And Rachel, who is our in-house expert on lungs, you know how deep into the bottom of the barrel I had to scrape to find one of these?
I'm Doug's nerd friend.
She is. She constantly excoriates me over text or the internet about my lack of knowledge in science.
Mm-hmm. He calls me when he wants to be wrong about things.
This is actually true. Yeah. I'm no longer married, so I have Rachel.
Did your wife used to school you on science too?
Yes.
Yeah.
She's a pseudoscientist. She's a sociologist. Yeah. I've been doing a lot of deep breathing exercises, and they have made me feel better as far as like down regulation and controlling my emotions and like just being able to generally have better control of my life at large. And I have no idea why this stuff works, but I am not the only one in the special operations community who has discovered the benefits of down regulation. So we had Rachel come in to talk to us about what's happening when we're engaging in things like box breathing or when we do crazy like shallow breathing, which I don't even know what that's called.
Hyperventilation.
There you go. Yeah, it's not just hyperventilation, Rachel. And this is the first part where I'm wrong. But
it's fine.
There are a variety of different breathing techniques, and we were hoping that Rachel could explain or illuminate us on what the purpose of some of those different techniques is.
Right. So the biggest one is deep breathing. So big, deep breaths are the first advice that most people get when they're in stressful scenarios of any kind, or even if they're undergoing cognitive and behavioral therapy to treat something like an anxiety disorder. They have a lot of crossover with the yoga community. So a lot of very sexy yoga instructors tell you to do the same thing. But there's actually scientific basis behind those. There's a reason they keep popping up, and that's because they're grounded in our actual physiology. What's happening there, among some other things, like mental relaxation, is when you take a deep breath, your lungs are pushing down on my personal favorite nerve, which is called the vagus nerve. And that's spelled V-A-G-U-S, not like the city, but it runs kind of down the left side and it bypasses your heart and it runs underneath your lungs and then it gets involved with your intestines. This nerve is one of the key parts of what we call the parasympathetic system, which is your, quote, rest and digest half of your nervous system.
As opposed to your fight or flight.
Exactly.
Yeah, see, I'm totally not a nerd.
Exactly. No, such a science nerd. I think Doug secretly reads textbooks at home by himself under the covers. But anyway, so these two halves, the fight or flight and the rest and digest, they don't really coexist. They actually interfere with each other's signaling. So if you have a lot of fight or flight activation, you aren't going to get a lot of rest and digest. So that's why when people get sufficiently scared, when they have a sufficient adrenaline rush, you tend to have the bowels evacuate. Because all of a sudden the body's like, hey, I'm not going to have time to digest this for a while. Just get rid of it so I can focus on the adrenaline half.
That's why people shit themselves.
That's why people shit themselves.
I have never shit myself. And other lies told by Doug on Twitter.
this year. So anyway, what you're doing there is you're doing the opposite of getting an adrenaline rush. So with these deep breaths where you're pressing down on this vagus nerve, you're stimulating that parasympathetic side of your nervous system, which is reducing the fight or flight half of your response. So when you're doing these things, you're doing these exercises, you're actually reducing your body's ability to produce and respond to adrenaline. Very short term, it's not a long-term effect, but it creates a forced kind of come down. And it impacts everything that the vagus nerve touches. So it's going to slow down your heart rate. It's going to just generally bring your entire system down to a nice lower baseline level.
When you go get your periodic health exam and your blood pressure and your heart rate are elevated too high, if you engage in box breathing, you can bring it down dramatically in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, you can forcibly bring your own heart rate down through focusing on deep breathing techniques, taking those big, deep breaths, and it's creating mechanical stimulation of that nerve.
So out of curiosity, there are a variety of different breathing techniques. So we're talking about overinflating the lungs is pressing down on like our intestines and putting pressure on the vagus nerve, right? Like when we do box breathing, where it's like 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds without a breath, like an empty lung. What is that doing? Is that just extending the pressure on the vagus nerve and then allowing it a little time to relax, or is there more going on there?
A lot of the time, you're looking at slowing down your breathing rate as a mechanism of just further increasing those responses. So when you have those huge deep breaths, and the box breathing not only slows down your rate, but it forces you to take a larger breath to make it through those 4 seconds. What's really happening there is you're not only impacting the vagus nerve, but you're also kind of impacting the amount of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream. When you take those big deep breaths and you slow it down, as opposed to hyperventilating, you are doing a better job of eliminating the carbon dioxide. And that actually also has an impact on anxiety and adrenaline levels. Carbon dioxide can actually cause a panic attack.
Also, to dwell in the whole Sedona thing, a lot of people that do breath work will say that they can induce almost like a spiritual journey, like a high of sorts through breath work alone, which in some ways, I think like there's the runner's high is a similar deal. Is that because of a lack of oxygenation or because they're slowing their breathing down, or is that like not a thing?
I don't know if I want to be the scientist who speculates wildly on YouTube today.
So from a lay standpoint, what is the appropriate time to institute these kind of exercises, and what are the best exercises to implement?
Well, the specific patterns are not my personal area of research, but the most recent literature on breathing patterns shows that the most effective type of breathing is 2 inhalations to try and kind of inflate your lungs as much as possible, followed by a long, slow exhalation. But from my perspective, what I think is the most important is that people just keep an open mind to the idea that breathing patterns can actually make a difference, because they do, and there's a physiological reason for that. So each person might be a little bit different, and they should just try these different techniques like box breathing or whatever works for you and see which one tends to have the biggest impact.
As an idiot contributing to this conversation, if you have a smartwatch, almost every smartwatch that's on the market today has some sort of breathwork app on it, which if it's not already on there, you can download and add to your list of activities, and it will guide you with vibrations through the inhalation, hold, exhalation, release, breathe. It'll just vibrate every time you're supposed to change, like to transition. And typically those breathwork apps become longer and longer. So it might be a 3-3-3-3 count that goes to like a 6-second count if you stick with it long enough. And you can kind of cut it off whenever you want. But for me, just 4 or 5 minutes of doing breath work completely changes the way I'm feeling about really anything. Like I could be stressed out going into like anything, and I'm just going to sit down and breathe for 4 minutes. And then I'm like, oh.
And I think it's a common misconception that you have to put on a bunch of spandex and then pretend you have a third eye in order to get a benefit from this stuff. Like for me personally, my happy time is when I'm walking my dogs. So if I'm just out walking the dogs, I'll just focus on my breathing for a few minutes of that. And that's the most relaxing life gets for me.
Now remember, kids, it's breath work, not breath play.